The warning lights flashed red across the galactic communications array as Captain Juwan sat at his monitoring station, sipping his third cup of coffee that shift. Another routine day scanning the deep space frequencies was about to become anything but routine. The holographic display suddenly came alive with an emergency transmission that made his blood run cold. The message showed alien faces twisted with terror and desperation. These were Veil 3 colonists, peaceful beings known throughout the galaxy for their gentle nature and advanced agricultural techniques. Their colony ship Serenity's Hope been attacked and captured by the most feared criminal organization in the Outer Rim, the Korthok Syndicate. Please, anyone who receives this transmission. The alien captain pleaded through the hologram, his voice breaking with emotion. We are being held captive by Korthak slavers. They have taken our ship and plan to sell us in the Rim markets. Among our passengers are 17 human refugees from the mining disaster on Kepler 44b. We beg for assistance from any civilized species. Captain Giwan's hands trembled as he enhanced the audio quality. The mention of human captives changed everything. For 3 days, this desperate message had been broadcasting across multiple frequencies, reaching every corner of civilized space. The Galactic Council had received it, of course, but they were still debating proper protocol in their marble chambers on Centauri Prime. While alien bureaucrats argued about jurisdiction and proper diplomatic channels, the signal had also reached Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station. Lieutenant Minji, working the night shift, immediately recognized the urgency. She had lost her own brother to pirates years ago and knew that every hour of delay meant more suffering for the captives. Without hesitation, she forwarded the transmission to Terra Command through the emergency channels. The message traveled through space at faster than light speeds, carrying with it the fate of hundreds of innocent beings. When it reached Admiral Hannah's desk, she was reviewing routine fleet reports in her office aboard the orbital defense platform. Admiral Hannah had seen combat in the Proxima Wars and the Centauri Uprising. She was a veteran who understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. As she watched the holographic message play, her expression grew darker with each passing second. The cold fury in her eyes would have made seasoned warriors step back. The Korthok Syndicate had operated for over 2 centuries, slaving entire populations and selling them to the highest bidder. They preyed on the weak and defenseless, knowing that the Galactic Council's response would be slow and ineffective. But they had never taken humans before, and they had no idea what they had just unleashed. Within 1 hour of receiving the transmission, Admiral Hannah had sent classified briefings to every major human fleet commander in the sector. The message was simple and direct. Human citizens were being held by slavers, and the Terran Defense Force would respond with overwhelming force. The Korthok Syndicate had made their final mistake. They had taken the wrong species captive, and now they would face the consequences of awakening humanity's protective instincts. Earth's war machine was already beginning to move. Nothing in the galaxy could stop what was coming. The massive command bridge of the Dreadnought, Indomitable, hummed with activity as Admiral Hannah stood at the center of the tactical display. The holographic star map showed the Theta Serpentis system in red, marking it as hostile territory. Round her, the most experienced fleet commanders in human space waited for their orders. Captain Dong Ho of the heavy cruiser Thunderstrike had fought in 12 major battles and never lost a single engagement. Captain Sung commanded the assault carrier Stormbreaker, known throughout the fleet for her lightning-fast boarding operations. Captain Yuna led the destroyer squadron Night Hunters, specialists in hit-and-run tactics that had terrorized pirates across 3 sectors. Gentlemen and ladies, Admiral Hannah began, her voice cutting through the bridge noise like a blade. We have 17 human civilians being held captive by the Korthok Syndicate. These are our people, miners, engineers, and their families, who survived the Kepler 44b disaster only to be captured by slavers. The holographic display shifted to show the colony ship Serenity's Hope and its estimated position within Korthok space. Intelligence reports indicated the ship was being held at the main slave processing facility, a massive station that had operated with impunity for decades. Task Force Retribution will consist of 12 heavy cruisers, 4 dreadnoughts, and our specialized assault ships, she continued. Along with our human civilians, Approximately 300 Veil 3 colonists are also being held. We will extract all prisoners and eliminate the Korthok presence in that system. The Centaurian ambassador, a tall, blue-skinned alien with concerned expressions, stepped forward from the observation deck. His species had maintained diplomatic relations with Earth for 50 years. But moments like these tested their understanding of human nature. "Admiral, surely we should wait for the Galactic Council's response," the ambassador said nervously. "There are proper diplomatic channels that must be followed. The Council has protocols for dealing with piracy," and Captain Dong Ho interrupted with barely contained anger. "With all due respect, Ambassador, your Council has had 3 days to act. 3 days while our people suffer in alien hands. We launch in 2 hours. The alien diplomat looked around the bridge desperately, hoping to find support among the human officers. Instead, he saw only determined faces and the cold efficiency of a military machine preparing for war. Humans were not asking for permission or waiting for approval. They were simply going to take action. But the legal implications, the ambassador protested weakly. The sovereignty of the Theta Serpentis system. The potential for diplomatic incidents. Admiral Hanna fixed him with a stare that could have frozen plasma. "Ambassador, when someone takes our people, we take them back. That is not negotiable. Your council can debate the legal implications after we bring our civilians home." Throughout the ship, the order had already gone out. Marines checked their weapons and armor. Engineers powered up the faster-than-light drives. Medical teams prepared for casualties. The human war machine was awakening, and its target was clear. The Centaurian ambassador watched in stunned silence as the fleet prepared for immediate departure. He had studied human psychology for years, but witnessing their protective instincts in action was both impressive and terrifying. Within 2 hours, the most powerful military force in known space would be heading toward Korthok territory. Nothing would stop them from bringing their people home, deep within the Korthok slave processing station. Warlord Krekstar examined his latest acquisition with the cold satisfaction of a predator who had trapped easy prey. The massive reptilian creature stood over 8 feet tall, his scaled hide scarred from countless battles across the galaxy. For 2 centuries, he had built his empire by preying on the weak and defenseless, and today seemed no different. The Veil 3 colonists huddled together in their holding cells, their gentle nature making them perfect for agricultural work on the rim worlds. These peaceful aliens would bring excellent prices at the next slave auction. Their advanced farming knowledge made them valuable commodities. Krekstar was already calculating his profits. But the 17 humans presented an interesting puzzle. These pinkskins were an unknown species to the Korthok, having never encountered them in their raids across the Outer Rim. They appeared physically weaker than most species, with no natural weapons or protective scales. Yet something about them made Krekstar uneasy. His lieutenant Vashko approached with a report. That only deepened the mystery. The smaller aliens for arms gestured nervously as he spoke, his voice carrying an undertone of concern that was unusual for a seasoned slaver. "The pinkskins are more aggressive than expected, Warlord," Vashko reported. "We had to segregate them into a separate holding area after one of the males nearly killed Guard Captain Nekmer with his bare hands. No weapons, no tools, just raw strength and fury." Krekstar's yellow eyes narrowed with interest. Very few species could match a Korthok guard in close combat, yet this human had apparently come close to victory. Still, they were now properly restrained with energy shackles and locked behind force fields. What could they possibly do? In the human holding area, former mining foreman Ji-hoon sat quietly against the wall, his eyes constantly moving as he observed their captors. To the Korthok guards, he appeared defeated and resigned to his fate. They had no idea that behind his calm exterior, a brilliant tactical mind was already working on their escape. Ji-hoon had spent 20 years managing dangerous mining operations on hostile worlds. He knew how to read people, how to spot weaknesses, and how to organize teams under pressure. More importantly, he understood that sometimes the best strategy was to let your enemies underestimate you. His wife Soyeon moved quietly among the other prisoners, using her medical training to tend to those injured during the capture. Her gentle hands checked wounds and offered comfort, but her sharp eyes were also noting guard rotations and security protocols. The Korthok saw only a caring female tending to the wounded, not recognizing the intelligence-gathering operation taking place. How many guards during the night shift? Jihoon whispered to his wife as she checked a cut on his arm. For in the corridor, 2 at the main entrance. She replied softly. They change every 6 hours. The energy barriers have a control panel 20 meters from our cell. The other humans began to understand what was happening. These weren't random conversations but carefully planned intelligence briefings. Teacher Haijin mapped the station layout from memory. Engineer Taiwu analyzed the power systems. Even the children contributed by counting guard footsteps and timing their patrols. The Korthok had made a fundamental error in judgment. They saw humans as just another weak species to be exploited, not understanding that humans were survivors from a death world who had learned to thrive under impossible conditions. They had no concept of human patience or the deadly calm that preceded calculated violence as night fell on the slave station. The Korthok guards settled into their routine, confident in their security systems. They had no idea that 17 humans were quietly preparing to show them why their species had never been successfully enslaved. The human war fleet burst out of hyperspace at the edge of the Theta Serpentis system, like avenging angels. Ships of various sizes hung motionless in the black void, their hulls gleaming with fresh battle paint. Each vessel carried the same message, painted in bold letters across their sides. Remember Earth's children? The Korthak patrol ships that had been lazily drifting near the system's edge suddenly came alive with activity. Their commanders had never seen ship designs like these before. The human vessels looked strange and boxy compared to the sleek alien warships. Through their communication channels, Korthok officers could be heard laughing at what they saw as primitive technology. That laughter lasted exactly 17 seconds. The first human weapons. Barrage lit up space like a miniature sun. 3 Korthok patrol ships simply vanished, turned into expanding clouds of superheated gas and twisted metal. The remaining alien vessels stared in shock at the empty space where their comrades had been moments before. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the cruiser Vengeance, watching her tactical screens with cold satisfaction. Her crew worked with deadly efficiency around her, targeting systems locked onto the largest enemy ships. She had lost her younger brother in the first alien attack on their colony world. Today was payback time. Focus fire on their command vessels. She ordered calmly. No survivors from the leadership ships. The Korthak fleet tried to scatter and regroup, but they were moving too slowly. Human weapons technology was proving to be far beyond what the aliens had expected. Energy beams that could slice through their strongest armor like paper. Missiles that could track targets through hyperspace jumps. Defense systems that made their ships nearly impossible to hit. Admiral Hannah's voice boomed across all communication. Frequencies in the system, speaking in the aliens' own language. Her words were clear and final. Any vessel containing human prisoners will be boarded immediately. All other ships will be destroyed without mercy. The Korthok commanders realized they were facing something they had never encountered before. These humans weren't just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. They were apex predators who had been pushed too far. Some alien captains tried to surrender, broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. Others attempted to flee toward the outer system. A few brave ones charged directly at the human fleet, hoping to take some enemies with them. None of these strategies worked. The human ships moved through the Korthak fleet like wolves through a flock of sheep. Their weapon systems had been designed specifically for this moment. Every shot was calculated. Every target was chosen for maximum psychological impact on the surviving enemies. The systematic destruction of the Korthok defense fleet took less than an hour. When the shooting stopped, only 5 alien vessels remained intact. These were the prison ships, now surrounded by human boarding craft. The rest of the once mighty Korthok fleet was nothing but glowing debris scattered across the darkness of space. The aliens had learned too late that first contact with humanity would also be their last contact. The human boarding pods slammed into the alien prison ships like steel fists punching through paper. Cutting torches sparked and hissed as the rescue teams burned through the outer hulls. Within minutes, armored figures poured into the corridors of the massive vessel called Serenity's Hope. Lieutenant Sunho moved at the front of Alpha Team, his powered armor making him look like a walking tank. The suit's servos whirred softly as he stepped over fallen debris, his helmet's display showing the ship's layout in glowing blue lines. Behind him, his team followed in perfect formation, their weapons ready but controlled. The freed Veil 3. Prisoners pressed themselves against the walls as the humans passed. These blue-skinned aliens had been slaves for months, beaten down and hopeless. Now they watched in wonder as these armored warriors moved through the ship with deadly purpose. The humans weren't just rescuing their own people, they were freeing. Everyone they found deep in the ship's detention area, Ji-hoon heard the sounds of fighting getting closer. The distinctive whine of human energy weapons echoed through the metal corridors. His wife So-yeon grabbed his arm as they heard footsteps approaching their cell block. The heavy door burst open, and Lieutenant Sunho stepped inside, his armor's lights cutting through the darkness. When he removed his helmet, Ji-hoon could see. He was barely older than his own son, but his eyes held the steady confidence of a professional soldier. "We're here to take you home," Sunho said simply. Ji-hoon felt his legs give out as overwhelming relief flooded through him. Tears streamed down his face as he embraced the young lieutenant. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We knew you would come. We never stopped believing." All around them, other prisoners were crying and laughing at the same time. Months of fear and desperation melted away as more human soldiers entered the detention area. They moved gently now, helping the weak and injured, offering water and medical supplies. Captain Sung's medical teams had set up emergency treatment stations throughout the ship. The doctors and nurses worked without rest, treating injuries that ranged from malnutrition to broken bones. They cared for every prisoner they found, regardless of species. The Veil 3 watched this with growing amazement. In their experience, most species only cared about their own kind. But these humans were spending their time and resources to help complete strangers. Some of the alien prisoners had never seen such kindness before. Meanwhile, the surviving Korthok guards were experiencing something they had never felt in their lives: genuine terror. These beings who had ruled through fear and violence were now cowering in corners as human soldiers hunted them down. Their weapons were useless against human armor. Their threats fell on deaf ears. The rescue operation continued for hours, as the humans methodically searched every section of the prison ships. They found hidden cells, secret torture chambers, and storage areas packed with stolen goods. Each discovery only made them more determined to help the victims. By the time the last prisoner was brought aboard the human medical ships, word was already spreading across the galaxy. Humanity had announced its presence to the universe in the most dramatic way possible by declaring that no one would be enslaved while humans drew breath. Warlord Krekstar sat in his command chair, watching his empire crumble around him. Massive Space Station had been the center of Korthok power for decades, but now it shook with each human weapon's impact. Emergency lights flashed red across the bridge as his officers shouted damage reports. "Sir, we've lost contact with the mining stations," one lieutenant reported, his voice trembling. "The humans destroyed them all." Krekstar's scaled hands gripped the armrests of his throne. He had ruled this sector through fear and brutality for 30 years. No one had ever dared challenge the Korthok Syndicate before, but these humans were different. They fought with a cold fury that chilled him to his core. "Open a channel to the human fleet," he ordered, swallowing his pride. All frequencies. The communication screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the human flagship, as Krekstar straightened his shoulders and tried to project the authority. He had always commanded, "Human fleet, this is Warlord Krekstar. We are prepared to return all prisoners in exchange for safe passage from this system." The response came from Admiral Hannah herself. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of absolute judgment. "You chose this path when you took innocents from their homes. You made your decision when you turned people into property. Now face the consequences of your actions." The communication cut off abruptly, leaving Krekstar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers looked at each other with growing panic. There would be no negotiation, no deals, no mercy. Captain Dongho's assault teams moved through the system like hunters tracking wounded prey. His ships had been specially equipped for this mission to find and destroy every trace of the Korthok organization. They hit the slave markets first, freeing thousands of prisoners from dozens of species. Then they moved on to the supply depots, weapons factories, and communication relays. The surviving Korthok pirates watched in horror as their entire civilization was systematically dismantled. These weren't random attacks or simple raids. Humans had studied their enemy carefully and knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. "They're not just defeating us," one Korthok captain whispered to his crew. "They're erasing us completely." The human fleet moved through the system like an unstoppable force of nature. Each ship had a specific target and mission. There was no chaos or confusion in their attacks, only cold, calculated destruction. They had come to deliver a message that would echo across the galaxy. Space stations exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Pirate ships tried to flee, but found themselves trapped by human vessels that seemed to appear from nowhere. The few Korthok commanders who, tempted to surrender, discovered that their enemies were not accepting prisoners today. This wasn't a battle or even a war. It was an execution carried out on a massive scale. The humans had decided that the Korthok Syndicate was a cancer that needed to be completely removed from the galaxy. They would not stop until every ship was destroyed and every base was reduced to floating debris. As the final Korthok stronghold erupted in flames, the message was clear to anyone watching. Humanity had arrived, and they would not tolerate slavery. In any form, the news traveled faster than light across the galaxy's criminal networks. Within 3 days, every pirate captain, slave trader, and crime boss knew what had happened at Theta Serpentis. The mighty Korthok Syndicate, an organization that had terrorized the Outer Rim for generations, had been completely wiped out in a single day. In the smoky cantinas and hidden meeting places where criminals gathered, the same conversations were happening everywhere. Hardened pirates who had never shown fear before now spoke in hushed whispers about the humans. These new arrivals had demonstrated something that shocked the entire underworld. They were willing to destroy anyone who crossed certain lines. The Zephyrian cartel was the first to react. Their leader, a reptilian creature named Seth, called an emergency meeting of his top lieutenants. "Get rid of all the captives," he ordered, his forked tongue flicking nervously. "I don't care what we paid for them. Dump them on the nearest neutral world and walk away." Within hours, transport ships were dropping off confused prisoners on planets across the sector. Former slaves who had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again suddenly found themselves abandoned on space stations, in colony worlds. The Zephyrians didn't even bother demanding ransom money. They just wanted the evidence of their slave trading to disappear. The Nexus pirates went even further. Their entire organization had been built around capturing and selling sentient beings. But after seeing what happened to the Korthok, they decided to abandon the slave trade completely. Bases that had operated for decades were suddenly empty as the pirates fled to find new, safer ways to make money. Other criminal groups followed suit. The Phantom Syndicate released their prisoners. The Red Nebula Gang shut down their slave markets. Even the notorious Void Runners, who had never backed down from a fight, decided that dealing in slaves was too dangerous now. The message was spreading through the galaxy's criminal underworld like wildfire. Humanity had drawn a line in the sand, and crossing it meant total destruction. When the Galactic Council's response fleet finally arrived at Theta Serpentis, they found a graveyard of twisted metal and scattered debris. The massive Korthok space stations were nothing but expanding clouds of wreckage. Their prison ships floated empty and dark, their hulls torn open by human weapons. Commissioner Veltar stood on the bridge of the Council flagship, staring at the destruction through the main view screen. In his 40 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. The Korthok had been a problem for the Council for decades, but they had always been too powerful to challenge directly. "How many ships did the humans lose?" he asked his aide. "According to our sensors, sir. None. The human fleet suffered no casualties at all." Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a victory, it was a demonstration of overwhelming power. The humans had announced their presence to the galaxy by completely eliminating one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in known space. The rescued prisoners were being cared for on nearby worlds, but the human fleet had vanished without a trace. They had delivered their message and disappeared back into the vast darkness of space, leaving everyone to wonder where they would strike next. The first Vale 3 transport ships arrived at their homeworld of Vale Prime, carrying something more precious than cargo hope. As the blue-skinned survivors stepped off the rescue vessels, they brought with them incredible stories that would change how their entire species viewed the galaxy. Elder Cathara listened with growing amazement, as the former slaves described their rescue. "The humans fought like demons to save us," one survivor explained. "But then they treated our wounds with the gentleness of healers. I've never seen such a contradiction in any species." The stories spread quickly through Vale 3 society. These humans had risked their lives to save complete strangers. They had shared their food, their medical supplies, and their protection with beings they had never met before. For a species that had been enslaved and forgotten by the galaxy, this act of kindness was almost impossible to believe. But the humans weren't finished. Reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Altarian Mining Guild's slave operations had been hit by mysterious human forces. Prison worlds that had operated in secret for decades were suddenly empty, their captives freed and their guards scattered. The Proxima Syndicate's entire network of forced labor camps had been dismantled in a single, coordinated strike. Each rescue operation followed the same pattern. Humans would appear without warning, destroy the slavers with overwhelming force, and then spend days caring for the freed prisoners. They brought medical teams, food supplies, and transport ships. They asked for nothing in return. Alien psychologists across the galaxy struggled to make sense of what they were witnessing. Dr. Thelmos of the Centauri Institute published a paper titled The Human Paradox that tried to explain how one species could be both incredibly violent and incredibly compassionate at the same time. "They seem to possess what they call righteous anger," he wrote. "This emotion drives them to extreme acts of destruction against those who harm innocents, while simultaneously motivating them to extraordinary acts of kindness toward victims. It is unlike anything we have observed in galactic civilization." The Galactic Council convened emergency session after emergency session, but their debates moved at a crawl compared to human action. While council members argued about jurisdiction and proper procedures, the humans were already moving to their next target. By the time the council passed a resolution to investigate the slave trade, entire criminal organizations had already been wiped out. Ambassador Quintal of the Regeline Federation stood before the council and stated what everyone was thinking. "While we have debated for decades about the slavery problem, these humans have solved it in weeks. Perhaps we should learn from their efficiency." Fear and respect for humanity began spreading through both criminal and legitimate circles of galactic society. Criminal organizations started abandoning any operations that might attract human attention. But legitimate governments also began to worry about what would happen if they ever found themselves on the wrong side of human justice. The humans had demonstrated that they possessed both the will and the power to enforce their moral code across the galaxy. They had shown that they would not ask permission or wait for approval when lives were at stake. A new age had begun, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. 6 months after the destruction of the Korthok Syndicate, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Galactic Trade Commission's latest report showed something remarkable. Piracy in the Outer Rim territories. It dropped to levels not seen in over 2 centuries. Criminal organizations that had operated openly for decades were now either extinct or had completely abandoned their most profitable activities. The fear of human retaliation had accomplished what thousands of years of council resolutions and diplomatic protests had failed to achieve. In the Great Chamber of the Galactic Council, Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered for an unprecedented session. The massive dome-shaped room buzzed with nervous energy as delegates whispered among themselves. Today they would finally hear directly from the humans who had turned their carefully ordered galaxy upside down. Admiral Hannah walked to the central podium with quiet confidence. She wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Defense Force. With no ornate decorations or symbols of rank beyond a single star on her collar, her presence commanded attention without demanding it. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "we appreciate this opportunity to address your concerns. However, I want to be perfectly clear about our position." She paused, looking around the chamber, at the hundreds of alien faces watching her intently. "We will continue to respond to distress calls regardless of your authorization. Some things transcend politics and bureaucracy. The protection of innocent life is one of those things." A murmur of unease rippled through the assembled delegates. The Andromedon representative stood up, his crystalline form catching the chamber's lights. "Admiral, the Council has procedures for dealing with criminal activities. Your unilateral actions undermine galactic law." Admiral Hana's response was measured but firm. "With respect, Counselor, your procedures have allowed slavery to flourish for millennia. While you debated and voted in formed committees, beings suffered and died in chains. We chose action over endless discussion." The chamber erupted in heated conversations as delegates argued among themselves. Some were outraged by human audacity, while others quietly admitted that the results spoke for themselves. The slave trade that had plagued the galaxy for generations had been virtually eliminated in just 6 months. Captain Yuna, now promoted to Admiral, stood beside her commanding officer. She had been given command of the new Anti-Piracy Task Force, a fleet of fast ships designed specifically to respond to slavery and piracy across the galaxy. Her vessels carried the same message that had been painted on the original rescue fleet. "Remember Earth's children?" The humans had essentially appointed themselves as the galaxy's protectors. Their methods, while often brutal to criminals, were proving incredibly effective. Slave markets that had operated openly were now abandoned ruins. Pirate havens that had existed for centuries were empty wastelands. The alien delegates were beginning to understand that they were witnessing the birth of a new galactic order. These humans didn't care about diplomatic protocols or political boundaries. They cared about results. They had demonstrated that some principles were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost or consequences. As Admiral Hannah concluded her address, one fact became crystal clear to everyone in the chamber. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their advanced technology or their growing numbers. It was their unwavering belief that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the price.